how to be a good mental health clinician right now when the world is trash and everything sucks. If you're the kind of provider that doesn't want to gaslight their patients. And if you aren't a clinician, this video might help you to figure out if your current therapist is a good fit, or it might give you some ideas about questions to ask of providers who you're considering hiring as your therapist. And so, if you're interested in hearing more about that, come along for the ride. Well, welcome back to Working on Our Mental, the podcast where we discuss ways to hold on to the tiny, tiny shreds of sanity that we have during this most precedented time. So, I am one of your hosts. The other one, I promise, she exists. She just goes to another school right now. So I am one of those hosts. I'm Michelle. I'm a psychiatric nurse practitioner and a licensed clinical social worker. So you get a 2 for 1. And I currently practice in a community health setting and also in private practice. And I do both therapy and medication management. Fun. So if you are like me, okay, out here therapizing, minding your business, okay? Um, you've probably also got clients who are going through it right now. And that is not something we're any stranger to as mental health providers, but I think that something that many of us may find kind of foreign is this like living through a time where it's not, like, isolated incidents that are personal to our clients necessarily that are bothering them so much, and instead, it's more like the entire, like, world and, like, collapse of Western civilization, and that can be really heavy, because, like, also we're people in the world, and we're living through it, and we're dealing with it, and that is, well, it's certainly unique. So I want to talk a little bit today about how to be a good mental health clinician right now when the world is trash and everything sucks. And if you're the kind of provider that doesn't want to gaslight their patients. And if you aren't a clinician, this video might help you to figure out if your current therapist is a good fit, or it might give you some ideas about questions to ask of providers who you're considering hiring as your therapist. Okay, so yeah, I mean, I remember when I first started my training, I was really curious about there were so many modes of therapy that exist and were popping up for treating trauma and like post traumatic stress disorders. But I always wondered to myself, like, how do you treat when the trauma is ongoing and in times of uncertainty when we're not sure when exposure to those traumas is going to stop. um yeah, that's a tough one, right? And so I think right now we are learning in real time how to handle that. um we've got some of our tried and true therapy methods, but I kind of want to talk from like this eclectic place. So this place where we're like using many, many different modalities of therapy and also just like pulling from a bunch of different sources on how to best be of help right now and most importantly do no harm. So let's go into my list of tips. Tip one would be, I think many of us get into these fields because we want to make the world better. And we want to help people. And, we want to help people to like fix the problems that they're facing. or like navigate the problems that they're facing. But I think that something that we need to remember to stay comfortable with is, you know, if we're going to build the skill in our clients of helping them to sit with uncertainty, we have to also sit with our feelings of helplessness sometimes. And we it's okay to acknowledge that we the best thing we can do sometimes is just to sit with people and to be with them and be present with them and to validate them, to validate that the feelings that they're having right now are real and that things really are quite scary, and that they're not overreacting. That can be so validating for people. It can be so normalizing for people, especially in this time where, you know, we are in a place that um, I think many of us as Americans never thought we'd be in. Well,
I'm not here, so I told you so.
mm, some of us as Americans kind of thought we were gonna.
I swore I wasn't gonna say that.
But anyway, but I digress. But that many of us had hoped we wouldn't get to, and we're hoping that we were being a little over dramatic about. But unfortunately, it seems that the emergency is here, as your client says. So in the midst of all that, when our clients come to us and tell us about how awful they're feeling and how scared they're feeling about the things that are going on around them, and especially when our clients are people who are from marginalized backgrounds and especially from marginalized backgrounds that are being directly targeted right now. We want to be so careful to make sure that we're not like we want to be so careful to make sure that we're not forcing this idea of like changing an emotion so quickly, that it's okay to sit with it, it's okay to feel it. Because what we resist persists, and so like that's a skill too. Also, that's just like so much of what being a good like steward is during this time. It's just being present for people and helping them to hear their own voice and validate that, what they that they can trust their own eyes and their own ears. Um, Especially when like, I don't know, I get this heavy sense, right? Where, the other night was report after report of you know, uh a certain somebody discussing the idea of shipping US citizens off to eh, okay. Especially so for example, there's the other night I was sitting down watching the updates on the Gilmar Obrego Garcia case, and I was just feeling really horrified by the prospect of the CCOT existing, the prison in El Salvador that was designed for people to not be released from. Think about that. So I'm horrified by the existence of it in the first place, but I think even scarier is the idea that folks can just get sent there without any formal charges necessarily being brought against them, and people who don't have any criminal records or anything like that, and then all this rhetoric around our dear president. Uh, Saying that he wants to send homegrowns over there now too. Meaning, you know, those of us here in the States who were born here and yeah, so wanting to send US citizens there. And it's scary to want to send anybody there when someone's only crime is escaping the chaos and terror from their country of origin, where the United States likely had some hand in destabilizing because we're really good at that. And at a time where Americans are really willy-nilly like, "Oh, this place is dangerous. I wanna get out of here." Baby, that's called immigration. You gotta say it. You gotta say the word with your chest. And yeah, so when we have folks coming in and they're expressing fear that, they are going to also possibly face being kidnapped off the street, plainclothes officers in masks covering their faces entirely and shoved into an unmarked car and taken to a location that you can't like contact anyone from or anything. When we have clients who are afraid of that, a scenario like that, it doesn't help anyone to try to like minimize the fears around that, right? Like while again, anything can happen, and I don't have a crystal ball. I can just tell you where it looks like things might go sometimes, but I don't have a crystal ball, and neither does anyone else. All we know is like what the administration has threatened to do and like wants to do and stuff. But yeah, but I mean, in my gut right now, it's saying that we are a little bit away from that with like the most private of private US born citizens, but it's still not impossible for it to happen. And so a helpful technique to use in this case would not be one where we're trying to use a skill to help that person reframe like an unhelpful thought, right? Um, we actually want to like we want to hear it out. And then we want to talk about ways with our clients like to be proactive and protect themselves. Um, yeah, just like running and hiding our heads in the sand, not helpful. So yeah, so listening and not rushing to fix because when we rush to fix, we run the risk of using the wrong tool. And using the wrong tool, I think, is a lot of the times where we end up doing more harm. Um, so speaking of tools, right? Like let's talk about helpful use of skills that are popular in therapy to help our clients during this time. So along the same lines as hint number one that we just discussed would be, let's look at the correct use of certain therapy skills and techniques. So, if you're familiar with cognitive behavioral therapy, you will know that it's based off of cognitive behavioral theory, which is this idea that our behaviors do not come from nowhere. Our behaviors did not fall out of a coconut tree.
Told you so.
Um, so yeah, that our behaviors they come from this deep web of like just long held cognitions that we have about ourselves and the world and our place in the world and how the world works. Those things are called schemas. And yeah, and so in the more immediate, right? This process where our thoughts inform our emotions and then our emotions inform our behaviors, like that is a mechanism for thought and developing beliefs. And uh, one way to take a look at helping folks who are feeling symptomatic with certain disorders, like it's very popular with treating anxiety and depression. So, one way of using this skill to treat anxiety and depression would be to help our clients to identify when they're having what's called a cognitive distortion. And so a cognitive distortion is when you are engaging in, I forget who first coined this phrase, but they call it stinking thinking. How cute. It's so cutesy. Stinking thinking. And basically it's like yeah, this idea that it's a thought that is like out of proportion with reality, if that makes sense. So, the goal with thinking about our cognitive distortions is that we can identify those distortions and then we can work to change those distortions. Now, here's where using the wrong tool at the wrong time can get us into trouble. Another thing I remember thinking back in my first go at grad school was goodness, CBT in the wrong hands. Couldn't that like be used to like gaslight people, um, and I think I pictured, therapists using changing an unhelpful thought to, convince a client that maybe like racism or sexism or homophobia wasn't like a real factor in something that's happened to them. And, trying to really push for this person to change this unhelpful thought, this cognitive distortion. And but yeah, like oftentimes racism, sexism, homophobia, all the isms, all the phobias, oftentimes those things do play a huge role in how people interact with us and how the world interacts with us and how things affect us. And so, while it's important to not like paint everything with like a really broad stroke or like a broad brush, we do want to acknowledge that this is real and we don't want to like make people think that it's a distorted thought that these things exist. So let's go through what some of the common distortions are. So one would be called mind reading, which is where we kind of jump to conclusions about what someone else might mean when they say an offhand comment or something, or jumping to conclusions about just like the significance of an event in our life, or yeah, jumping to conclusions essentially. And so I would fear that, in the wrong hands, a therapist might try to use this tool of like helping someone to do cognitive restructuring by saying, oh, well, that thing that you perceived as racist, sexist, homophobic, or whatever, let's challenge that thought. And, and like almost falsely leading down this road of maybe implying that if someone didn't explicitly say something racist, sexist, homophobic, etc., that maybe the client was engaging in mind reading. And that is not applicable in situations like this, right? Because we know that so much of the isms and the phobias they happen implicitly, or they happen like in ways that are like a little bit more sneaky and insidious. And so mind reading would not necessarily be applicable here. I'm not saying it never is. I'm not saying that people never like misattribute, 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 like, racism to an interaction. But, I think we also just have to be really mindful that people who are in marginalized bodies and marginalized like cultures, they know so much more than a practitioner sitting across from them who is not in that marginalized embodiment about, when someone has said something kind of slick. So, yeah, I don't ever want to like take someone down that road. Um, However, an appropriate use of a therapy skill might be identifying when a client of ours is completely catastrophizing, right? And so maybe they're like, oh gosh, uh, when they're saying things like, wow, nobody is speaking up, and, we're all going to go careening into disaster. And, we're definitely on the struggle bus right now, faux show. However, people are speaking up, and there are things that people are doing to be brave and make their voices heard. And those things are having an impact. And so, we want to help people to hold some hope, because that will help them um, to stay in a place of centeredness and action, in order to like do stuff. We don't want our clients to feel so overcome that they can't act in their own best interests. So, or in the self interest of the world. So hopefully that made sense, right? That like we want to use skills better. Or another way I might look at using a skill is helping folks with one of the dialectical behavioral skills. The dialectical behavior therapy is a therapy that's very closely related to cognitive behavioral therapy. So we're going to call cognitive CBT and we're going to call dialectical DBT. So DBT takes this extra layer of mindfulness, and also like self regulation skills, meaning, it helps folks to get in touch with, what they're really feeling, thinking, seeing, experiencing, sensing, all of that. And also, the self soothing and self regulation skills help to bring people down from a really like escalated place to a place where they're feeling more like thoughtful, centered, and in their what's called a wise mind. Um, s- we'll talk a little bit about the wise mind. An aside, quickly, wise mind. It's what's between our emotional mind, like our mind that's completely emotional, and our mind that's completely like, thinks it's logical. And it's that thing right in between, right? Where we're both using logic, we're using logic, reason, and our emotions to help us to make decisions about how we're going to behave next. Yes. And so I find a lot of the skills to be really helpful for, you know, uh, bringing folks down from like, feeling really afraid and overwhelmed and back down to a place where they can act. And so while you cannot meditate your way out of like a hostile government takeover, you can meditate yourself down from a state of being so heightened about it that all you can do is like hide in your room and take to bed like a Victorian woman, and move a person from that space to a place where they can do something, where they can find their place in the movement, and where they can find places that they can be empowered. And speaking of the movement and empowerment, that will take us to my third tip. Encourage people to, if they are having strong feelings about like justice and what's fair and what's not fair right now. There's like this growing body of research that shows that encouraging folks to engage in activism is actually really good for their mental health. And, it's theorized to be good for their mental health for many reasons. First off, it helps them to maintain like a sense of control, right? And like a sense that, they are in the driver's seat of their own lives and their own destinies, which is great. And also, it helps to, instead of having, our clients like bury their feelings about how things are not fair, having them take an active role in trying to change things, it just really improves their sense that they are efficacious, right? That they can affect change and that they can, that their impact on the world is felt in some way. And that's really important for people, especially people who are really like just mission driven as humans. So, one example of using a just like a regulation skill might be when we're teaching folks how to go home and have that talk with their racist grandma over the dinner table, right? Like, so right now I'm kind of like encouraging folks not to do that thing where they shy away from their relatives who, have difficult viewpoints, especially when those viewpoints are not things that like directly impact our specific marginalizations. So, for example, right, like if I were to go hang out with like a group of, people from a race that has more like perceived like social power, and they're saying racist things around me, I mean, it would be good for me to speak up and stuff, but I think I give myself a little bit more leeway to step back from that and, because like I'm the target in that situation. And so I'm going to have a lot of feelings and it's going to be a lot of labor. And not that I shy away from labor, but it's just different when it's about you. I mean, I encourage anyone who can withstand things like that to do so because we've seen how using ourselves in rooms of people who are different can absolutely affect change. Something I'm thinking about is when that congresswoman who is trans um, spoke to Congress and helped to defeat like a really awful anti-trans bill from moving any further. And it was because she was using her own personal life experience. She's like, "You all know me, okay? Like, you know that like there's nothing like sexualized about me just walking around and being alive." Like I loved it. She was like, "There's nothing lascivious about this. There's nothing lascivious about me like just going to like the pickup line at school and getting my kids. Like I'm just trying to live my life and be a person." And so that can be really resonant for people, right? Like some people really do just like need to know somebody who is different from them in order to, you know, not be so problematic. And yeah, and there's many a school of thought on that, but I think right now is not the time for us to be like arguing with reality about that, and we need to just like kind of face reality about it and work with it. That's also another DBT skill, radical acceptance. Anyway, so back to distress tolerance. So we might teach somebody how to, for example, if I am talking to someone about, I feel really, really passionate about trans rights. And as a cis woman, I feel really like it is my duty to like shield my sisters, like to put myself in front of them and shield them from some of the like aggressive targeting and stuff and to not like fight their battles for them or anything because like they have not only fought their own battles but they have fought battles for everybody, okay? So yeah, it's not that they can't, right? But it is, when you're somebody who is similarly marginalized, it's exhausting to always have to be justifying your right to like take up space in this earth and breathe. And so anytime that I can take that opportunity to go and like, have that conversation with somebody who believes differently, I'm going to take that opportunity because I am not being personally attacked, and I can take the heat for them in that moment. And so that doesn't mean though that I'm not going to feel really activated in my body when someone's saying some ignorant stuff. I remember really recently I was in one of those like TikTok lives or whatever where folks go on and like talk about like it's like a debate room almost and stuff. And so this was like a transphobic debate room, and I went in to give my 2 cents and stuff, and, the hosts of that room were just, like, so, like, ignorant and awful, and I guess also too, I was just, like, having all these thoughts and stuff, like, about how, I was coming in with, like, facts and, like, even telling them, like, where I was getting, like, my like little research clips from and once it became difficult for them to refute the facts I was telling them, they turned into like making personal like attacks at me, like being like, "Oh, your voice is so shrill." Listen, justice for black women from Long Island. We didn't choose this. Anyway, so, but yeah, and I was getting kinda heated because I don't like being personally attacked, especially for, like, characteristics that I can't really change. But, uh, yeah, I just well, that was a really good moment to use a distress tolerance skill, because, I could use that skill to help center myself so that I could get myself back in the headspace to continue to have that conversation. And I was under no, illusion that, like, my talking points were going to do much to change the mind of the hosts, because they're people who live in such a place of like not integrity that they would deign to like make money off of like harming people, but and like creating a space that's like toxic and hateful. But um, I do know that people who are on the fence about their beliefs frequent those rooms, and it's important for them to hear facts. And I also know that people who are, trans and marginalized are in those rooms sometimes, like overhearing stuff. And I want to make sure that, like, someone is counterbalancing things. And also, even for like the people who, seemingly like are just, who I'm not under the illusion I will change. Maybe I've planted a seed, I mean, they might still be in a place where they're too, like, defensive and stuff to consider it, but, the seed is there, and maybe down the line when something relevant comes up, they'll be reminded of it, and, um, maybe good can ensue, but who knows? Whatever. So, yeah, so basically that would be, like, a good way to use a distress tolerance skill, to learn how to kind of like steel yourself in a moment that's really hard, and to help you to not run away from that moment and instead meet the moment. Um, what else? Community. I like to push folks towards community. One of the reasons why, folks theorize that activism is so helpful is that it not only helps people to feel empowered and like they can affect change and they're efficacious, but it also connects them to other like-minded people who are concerned about a similar cause. And you know what they say about meeting like-minded people who are concerned about similar things, you might make a friend. And so yeah, and community is so important. Communities often I've experienced, um, I've experienced it to be the cure, right? Like I've seen, clients of mine who at first really think that individual therapy is the way to go for them. And it might be, but I'll also, if they are going through something that maybe it's like a really specific event that like only another group of people could understand. How comforting is that for you to be in a room of other people who understand that thing and you can kind of, like relate to each other on a completely different level. And so, pushing folks in towards building community with people around them and strengthening their social connections and making new ones can make their lives feel so much richer and can definitely help to abate some of those feelings of like helplessness and hopelessness during a time like this. And what else? So don't gaslight your patients, use the right skills. Oh, lastly, I think that it's important to, again, it's like not a requirement or anything, but I think that it's important to not just like profit off of like helping the communities that we're concerned about, Um, because I mean, it's my work to work with folks who are marginalized and stuff, right? And I make money from it. But like, I also see it as like my responsibility to do what I can to like change some of the structural things or like throw my hat in the ring towards changing some of the structural things that my clients who are particularly vulnerable right now are up against. That way, it's not like almost like holding a monopoly, right? Like where, you know, the symptoms I'm treating are strengthened by living in an awful system. And and so if I just did nothing to try to affect that awful system, well, let's make some money. But, um, but I don't want that, right? Like I wanna walk the walk. And so I think it's important to not just, offer your solidarity and advocacy and allyship in the therapy room, but also to try to find ways outside of the therapy room to affect change or work on policy and make things known. So yeah, those are like my tips. I mean, oh, a couple more actually. I lied. That wasn't the last one. Seek supervision. So especially when transference and countertransference pop up. So countertransference, well, I'll start with transference, I guess. Transference is like this act of often unconscious, mostly unconscious, where you are like having feelings that um, are somewhat incongruous with what is going on in front of you, like in an interpersonal dynamic, if that makes sense. And finding that the reason you're having those feelings is because of something from your past. And so, one example would be if I am, working with someone who reminds me of, I don't know, like a past friendship that's ended or something like that. It would be really hard for anybody to like not treat someone like that same way because they're being kind of triggered, right? And so actually in the case of the therapist having those feelings, that's called countertransference. But um yeah. So just being mindful of those things and getting supervision from like a trusted person who maybe is either more experienced than you or they can also be your peer supervision is amazing. And so yeah, just getting consultation about like you know what to do and where some of the feelings that feel a little icky are coming from, especially if we're pretty sure they're not coming from a situation that's right in front of us. And the other thing I would say is to, also ourselves be in community. And so, make sure that we're really filling our own cup with some good socialization, especially if we have like professional contacts and stuff of folks who are also in the trenches right now. Like we can offer each other like a lot of comfort. And Also just like self-care. But like really self-care, it's important for us to go to therapy too. I love to think about therapy as actually just one big pyramid scheme where like there's like a grand master therapist at like the very top of the pyramid and the rest of us are just like therapists who are getting therapy from the therapist above us. Um Anyway, that's just a thought. Yeah, so it's important for us to attend to our mental as well. And all that said, now that I've yapped consistently for this little time period, I am getting a little sleepy. I need a little nap, okay? Because it's been a long week. It's been a long, long, long week. But yeah, let me know if there's anything you think I missed, or if you disagree with anything, or if you want me to go further into another tip or trick. And yeah, this has been my little spiel on how to try to do no harm when the world is feeling really harmful. And I love to like kind of just keep like cute little trinkets on my desk. And I've got this cute little trinket. It's a concerned dog. I love concerned dog. So yeah. If this was helpful to you, please like, comment, subscribe, if you will. And I will catch y'all on the flip.